Welcome to Lore of the Lost, where we uncover stories from the past steeped in truth and historical accuracies. Get unheard of perspectives and discover what life was really like during these times. Listen to the boring history as you drift off into another world. I am George Lancaster, your speaker tonight. In our first episode, we journey across the centuries to witness daily life aboard one of history's most feared vessels. Our companion on this exploration is Thomas Whitfield, a carpenter's mate who found himself aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge in the year 1717, when the ship sailed under the black flag of Edward Teach, known to the world as Blackbeard. The morning mist clings to the waters off the Carolina coast as Thomas awakens to the familiar creak of timbers and the gentle roll of the sea. The year is 1717, and he finds himself aboard what was once La Concorde, a French slave ship that fate and piracy have transformed into the fearsome Queen Anne's Revenge. Originally serving as a French privateer and later as a slave ship, the vessel was captured by Blackbeard in 1717 near the island of Martinique, where it had been transporting enslaved Africans from West Africa to the New World. Thomas stirs in his hammock, strung between the massive timbers that form the ship's hull. The space around him is cramped, barely 5 feet between decks, and filled with the breathing forms of 200 other souls. The ship measures approximately 100 feet in length and 28 feet in breadth, with a hold depth of 12 feet. The air carries the mingled scents of tar, salt, unwashed bodies, and the lingering ghost of the ship's previous cargo. Though the human chains have been removed, Thomas can still sense the weight of their history in the ship's very bones. As dawn light filters through the gunports, Thomas swings his legs over the edge of his hammock and feels his bare feet touch the rough planking. The wood beneath him tells a story of craftsmanship and transformation. Surviving features of the ship's construction strongly suggest it was built by French shipwrights in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. The fastening patterns and construction methods speak of skilled hands working in distant shipyards, never imagining their creation would one day strike terror into merchant vessels across the Atlantic. The ship's bell chimes 6 times, marking the end of the middle watch and the beginning of another day in this floating commonwealth of outcasts and adventurers. Thomas makes his way carefully through the tangle of hammocks and sleeping forms toward the ladder that leads to the upper deck. The hierarchy aboard is clear yet different from the rigid structures of naval vessels. Pirates were first and foremost sailors, and a pirate captain was frequently elected to his position rather than appointed by authority. The position might not be permanent either, since sailors who had mutinied once before were not shy to do so again. On deck, the Caribbean morning reveals itself in shades of amber and rose. The Queen Anne's Revenge cuts through the water with surprising grace for a vessel of her size and armament. Blackbeard had overhauled the vessel's armament from the original 14 guns to 40 guns, transforming the former merchant vessel into a floating fortress. Thomas runs his practiced eye over the additional cannon ports cut into the hull, evidence of the ship's metamorphosis from commerce to conquest. The crew begins to stir around him, each man falling into the rhythm of shipboard life that has governed sailors for centuries. Life on a pirate ship involved a surprising amount of hard work. Pirates were first and foremost sailors, and a pirate ship required a great deal of skill to operate and constant maintenance to keep afloat. Thomas notes how the men organized themselves naturally, with experienced hands guiding the newer recruits through the complex choreography of managing a sailing vessel. As the ship's carpenter's mate, Thomas's day begins with an inspection of the hull and rigging. Pirates usually lived on a going-from-day-to-day basis, and most supplies for repair came off ships they captured, so they commonly stripped the sails off a ship, and the boards, and sometimes yards and spars, so they had supplies for themselves. Every piece of wood, every length of rope, every scrap of sailcloth represents precious resources that might mean the difference between survival and disaster in the vast emptiness of the ocean. The morning inspection reveals the constant battle against the sea's relentless assault on wood and iron. Thomas examines the seams between planks, checking for signs of the oakum and tar beginning to work loose. The tropical heat and alternating wet and dry conditions test every joint and fastening. He notes several areas where the hull's caulking needs attention, a task that will require careful work with hammer and chisel to remove the old material before fresh oakum can be driven into place. The ship's company assembles for the morning meal, and Thomas joins the queue that forms near the galley. The cook, a weathered man named Samuel who lost 3 fingers to a cutlass years before, ladles a portion of burgoo into Thomas's wooden bowl. The foundation of the naval diet during this era was the ship's biscuit, also known as hardtack, created from flour, water, and a little bit of salt. Salted beef and pork formed the basis of most meals, along with dried peas, cheese, and butter when available. Thomas examines his portion, chunks of salted pork swimming in a thin gruel thickened with pounded ship's biscuit, seasoned with whatever dried herbs the cook has managed to preserve. The ship's biscuit, hard as stone and requiring considerable effort to chew, forms the backbone of every meal. These simple biscuits were made from cheaper and roughly ground wheat flour, and often came infested with weevils. 1 pound of biscuits consisted of 3 to 5 biscuits, which one period observer described as plate-sized. Thomas has learned to tap his biscuit against the table before eating, listening for the sound that indicates whether the weevils have taken up residence. The protein, he has been told with grim humor, adds to the nutritional value. The water, drawn from barrels that have been aboard for weeks, tastes of wood and carries a green tinge that speaks of algae growth. In the US and Britain, rum was generally issued as beer went bad at sea, and rum was cheap, took up less space, and was locally sourced. Thomas receives his daily tot of rum mixed with water, the harsh liquid burning his throat but providing a momentary escape from the monotony of shipboard provisions. As the crew eats, conversation flows around Thomas in a mixture of English, French, Spanish, and tongues he cannot identify. Pirates were organized criminals who used a democratic system, spelled out by written articles of agreement, to limit the captain's power and keep order on board the ship. The articles they all swore to upon joining regulate everything from the division of plunder to the punishment for fighting among themselves. Thomas remembers the ceremony when he first came aboard, standing before the assembled crew with his hand on a Bible as he swore to abide by their compact. The multinational nature of the crew reflects the complex web of colonial trade and conflict that defines these waters. Former merchant sailors sit beside escaped indentured servants, deserters from various navies, and men who simply chose the uncertain freedom of piracy over the grinding poverty of life ashore. Many mariners had turned to piracy precisely because of the strict discipline and harsh punishments of life on a merchant or naval ship. Among them are Africans who gained their freedom when Blackbeard captured La Concorde, their knowledge of the ship's original layout proving invaluable to her operation. After the morning meal, Thomas reports to the ship's carpenter, a grizzled Scotsman named Macready who has sailed these waters for 3 decades. Together they examine the damage report from the previous day's watch, a loose gun carriage that threatens to break free in heavy weather, several planks in the gunwale that show signs of rot, and a section of railing damaged when they last took a prize. Carpenter's tools and medical supplies were worth their weight in gold to the pirates. Every chisel, every plane, every auger represents irreplaceable capability until they can capture another vessel carrying such treasures. The work begins with shaping a replacement plank from a timber salvaged from their last capture. Thomas uses a broad axe to rough out the shape, each stroke calculated to avoid waste in the precious wood. The rhythmic sound of his work joins the symphony of shipboard activity. The creak of rigging under strain, the splash of waves against the hull, the calls of men working aloft to adjust the sails to catch the shifting wind. As the morning progresses into the heat of the Caribbean day, the ship's routine unfolds with practiced efficiency. Many captives on pirate ships were surprised by the orderliness and professionalism of the crew, with one quoted as saying, "At sea they perform their duties with a great deal of order, better even than on the ships of the Dutch East India Company." The organization aboard emerges not from rigid discipline, but from the practical necessity of survival. Every man understands that his life depends on the ship remaining seaworthy and ready for action. Thomas watches as the gun crews conduct their daily drill, the massive cannon being run in and out with practiced precision. The addition of 26 guns to the original 14 has required significant modification to the ship's structure. New gun ports have been cut through the hull, additional support timbers added to handle the weight and recoil, and the deck reinforced to bear the tremendous stress of sustained combat. The transformation speaks to both the ambition and the engineering skill of those who converted La Concorde into Queen Anne's Revenge. The midday sun beats down mercilessly on the deck, and Thomas seeks shade beneath the canvas awning that has been rigged amidships. The tropical heat makes heavy work nearly unbearable, and the crew has learned to pace themselves through the long hours of daylight. He observes the easy camaraderie among the men, so different from the fear-based hierarchy of many merchant vessels. In strong contrast to the merchant ships of the time, where sailors were poorly paid, badly behaved, and frequently abused at the hands of their autocratic captains, pirates were well-paid, well-behaved, and well-treated. The afternoon brings a welcome distraction as the lookout calls down from the masthead. A sail has been spotted on the horizon, and the ship immediately comes alive with purposeful activity. Thomas joins his shipmates at the rail, squinting across the glittering water to catch a glimpse of their potential quarry. The democratic nature of pirate decision-making becomes apparent as informal discussions break out among the crew about whether to pursue the distant vessel. Blackbeard emerges from his cabin, and Thomas studies the man who has become legend even in his own lifetime. Tall and imposing, with the famous black beard that gives him his name, Edward Teach carries himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Yet Thomas has observed that the captain's authority derives as much from his reputation and skill as from any formal rank. The captain was elected by all the men in the crew and could be replaced by a majority vote by the same. Cowardly or brutal captains were quickly voted out of their position. The discussion about pursuing the distant sail unfolds according to the articles they all signed. While the captain makes tactical decisions in moments of immediate danger, the choice of targets and the general conduct of their crews requires broader consultation. Major decisions, like whether to attack a particular ship or how to divide the plunder, were usually made by a crew vote. Thomas listens as experienced hands debate the wisdom of pursuit. The unknown vessel's size, probable armament, and likely cargo weighed against the risks of engagement and the current state of their own supplies. The ship's quartermaster, a position unique to pirate vessels, plays a crucial role in these deliberations. Officers received 1¼ of an ordinary seaman's share of any booty taken, but the quartermaster holds special responsibility for representing the crew's interests and ensuring fair distribution of any prizes. Thomas has come to understand that this democratic element, however imperfect, provides a stark contrast to the absolute authority exercised by captains in legitimate maritime service. As the afternoon wears on, the decision is made to investigate the distant sail. The Queen Anne's Revenge alters course, her bowsprit swinging toward the horizon where their potential prize continues on its unwary course. Thomas feels the subtle change in the ship's motion as she turns into a more favorable wind, her massive spread of canvas drawing efficiently in the steady trade breeze. The preparation for possible action follows a well-rehearsed pattern. Gun crews check their equipment, small arms are distributed and inspected, and the surgeon prepares his instruments in the cockpit below. Having a doctor on board was an advantage, but depended on whether one could be coerced into joining the crew. If not, then having a medicine chest was the best a captain could do to reduce the effects of illness and injury. Their current surgeon, a Frenchman who joined them voluntarily after his previous ship was taken, represents both medical skill and the cosmopolitan nature of their floating community. Thomas returns to his work as the ship closes distance with their quarry, but his ears remain attuned to the sounds that will signal action stations. The mundane task of fitting a new plank takes on added urgency, knowing that within hours the ship might be engaged in the violent business that has made Blackbeard's name feared throughout the Atlantic. The careful work of maintaining the vessel's integrity becomes part of the larger struggle for survival in a world where the margin between life and death can be measured in the thickness of a ship's hull. As evening approaches, the chase has brought them within clear sight of their quarry, a merchant vessel of moderate size flying English colours. Thomas joins the crowd at the rail as they study their potential prize through the ship's telescope. The merchant appears to be well armed but smaller than the Queen Anne's Revenge, making her a tempting target for a crew that has been at sea for weeks without significant capture. The democratic process resumes as the crew considers their options. The merchant's course suggests she is bound for Charleston or one of the other Carolina ports, likely carrying trade goods or perhaps passengers willing to pay for safe passage. In perhaps the most brazen act of his piratical career, Blackbeard would later blockade the port of Charleston for nearly a week, seizing several ships and demanding ransom. But for now they focus on the immediate opportunity presented by this single vessel making her lonely way across the vast ocean. The setting sun paints the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, and Thomas observes how the fading light affects the tactics being discussed. Night actions at sea carry enormous risks, with the possibility of collision or grounding in unfamiliar waters. Yet darkness also provides cover for approach and the psychological advantage of emerging from shadow, like some maritime spectre. The crew's experience in these waters, gained through months of operating along the Carolina coast, weighs heavily in their calculations. As the last light fades, Thomas witnesses the transformation of the Queen Anne's Revenge from a sailing vessel into an instrument of war. The ship's peaceful routine of maintenance and navigation gives way to the deadly choreography of preparation for combat. Canvas screens are rigged to protect the gun crews from splinters. Sand is scattered on the deck to provide footing when blood makes the planking slippery, and the ship's boats are checked to ensure they remain seaworthy should emergency evacuation become necessary. The night watches begin with heightened alertness, every man aware that dawn might bring action. Thomas finds sleep elusive as he lies in his hammock, listening to the subtle changes in the ship's rhythm that speak of careful navigation in waters where a miscalculation could spell disaster. The Queen Anne's Revenge moves through the darkness with the confidence born of skilled seamanship and intimate knowledge of local conditions. He reflects on the strange circumstances that have brought him to this moment. 6 months ago, he was working as a carpenter in Port Royal, struggling to earn enough to support himself in the aftermath of the great earthquake that had devastated the city. Many pirates had formerly served on merchant ships and knew how horrid some captains could be. His own experience with a brutal captain on a merchant vessel had soured him on legitimate maritime service, making the democratic chaos of piracy seem like freedom by comparison. The ship's articles that govern their conduct provide a structure that, while unconventional, offers protections unknown aboard many legitimate vessels. Anything not covered in the articles would be settled by crew members, who would act as a type of judiciary body to interpret the articles and apply them to situations not found in the articles. Thomas has seen this system work to settle disputes that might have led to violence aboard other ships, the collective wisdom of the crew providing justice where autocratic authority might have bred resentment. Dawn breaks grey and misty, revealing the merchant vessel less than 2 miles ahead. The night's careful maneuvering has brought the Queen Anne's Revenge into position to intercept, and Thomas feels the familiar tension that precedes action. The ship comes alive with purposeful movement as gun crews take their positions and small arms are distributed among the boarding parties. The merchant captain's response to their approach will determine the nature of what follows. So if violence wasn't necessary, pirates often didn't seek it out. A wise merchant will recognize the futility of resistance and yield to overwhelming force, sparing his crew and passengers the horror of combat. A foolish or brave one will fight, turning the morning sea into a theater of violence and destruction. Thomas takes his assigned position near the mainmast, ready to assist with sail handling or damage control as the situation demands. Around him, the crew displays the professional competence that has made Blackbeard's ships so successful. Pirates had to be remarkably good seamen if they were to ever catch fleeing merchant vessels and escape the unwanted attentions of heavily armed naval vessels. The skills required for their way of life demand excellence in seamanship, navigation, and combat, a combination that only the most capable mariners can master. The morning light reveals details of their quarry, a well-maintained vessel with clean lines and properly set canvas. Her crew appears alert and organized, suggesting a captain who maintains good discipline. This could make the encounter more dangerous, as a well-trained crew is more likely to offer effective resistance. Yet it also suggests the ship is worth taking, as successful merchants invest in quality vessels and competent crews. As the distance closes, Thomas observes the ritual of identification and intimidation that precedes most pirate attacks. The black flag rises to the Queen Anne's Revenge's masthead, its skull and crossbones visible against the morning sky. The sight strikes fear into merchant crews throughout the Atlantic, representing not just death, but the complete breakdown of civilized order that piracy embodies. The merchant vessel's response comes quickly. Instead of striking her colors in surrender, she alters course and increases sail in an attempt to escape. The chase is on, and Thomas feels the Queen Anne's Revenge surge forward as every sail is set to catch the morning breeze. The larger ship's superior speed becomes apparent as they begin to close the gap. The merchant's brave but futile attempt at flight serving only to delay the inevitable encounter. The pursuit continues through the morning hours, both vessels racing across the sparkling waters under full sail. Thomas marvels at the skill displayed by both crews as they extract every possible knot of speed from their ships. The merchant captain displays considerable seamanship in his attempts to escape, using every advantage of wind and current to maintain distance. Yet the Queen Anne's Revenge's superior size and sail area gradually overcome these tactical advantages. By midday, the merchant vessel has been overtaken and the deadly dance of maritime combat begins. Thomas watches as the two ships maneuver for advantage, their captains displaying the kind of skill that makes the difference between victory and destruction. The Queen Anne's Revenge's superior firepower becomes apparent as her 40 guns are brought to bear, creating a disparity that makes the outcome almost inevitable. The merchant captain's courage proves admirable, but ultimately futile. His vessel's guns speak first, sending iron across the water toward the pirate ship. Thomas feels the deck shudder beneath his feet as cannonballs strike the hull, the sound of splintering wood mixing with the roar of their own guns responding. The noise is overwhelming, not just the crash of cannon, but the screams of men, the crack of rigging under strain, and the continuous rumble of gun carriages rolling across the deck. The engagement, though brief, demonstrates the harsh realities of maritime warfare in this age of sail and shot. Pirates constantly got legs, arms, and other body parts hit in battle, mainly due to splinters caused by cannonballs. For every man hit by a cannonball, there are probably 100 more men hit by splinters. Thomas witnesses the devastating effect of wooden splinters flying through the air like deadly arrows, understanding why experienced sailors fear them more than the cannonballs themselves. The merchant vessel's resistance collapses quickly under the Queen Anne's Revenge's overwhelming firepower. Her mainmast falls in a tangle of rigging and canvas, and her captain wisely strikes his colors before more lives are lost. The cheers that rise from the pirate crew express relief as much as triumph. Every engagement carries the risk of death or maiming, making swift victory a blessing to be celebrated. The boarding that follows demonstrates the organized efficiency that distinguishes successful pirates from mere sea robbers. Thomas joins the party that swarms across to secure the prize, his carpenter's skills immediately put to use evaluating the merchant vessel's condition and potential value. The ship proves to be carrying a mixed cargo of manufactured goods from England, bound for the Carolina colonies, cloth, tools, and luxury items that will fetch good prices in the pirate havens of the Caribbean. More valuable than the cargo, however, are the supplies that the Queen Anne's Revenge can use directly. Very valuable items to the pirates sometimes were considered common goods for everyday life. Sometimes carpenter's tools and medical supplies were worth their weight in gold to the pirates. Thomas discovers a chest containing excellent woodworking tools, sharp chisels and planes that will make his work aboard the pirate ship far more effective. The merchant's medicine chest yields drugs and surgical instruments that their surgeon examines with professional interest. The treatment of the captured crew follows the established pattern that governs such encounters. Most pirate crews were composed of either mutineers or those captured by other pirates and forced to join them or be killed. Some of the merchant sailors, particularly those with valuable skills, are given the choice between joining the pirates or being set adrift in their ship's boats. The captain and officers, being gentlemen, are treated with courtesy but firmly detained to prevent any attempt at retaking their vessel. The days following the capture settle into a new routine as the pirates work to extract maximum value from their prize. Thomas finds himself constantly busy, dividing his time between maintaining the Queen Anne's Revenge and supervising repairs to the captured merchant vessel. The pirates face a fundamental decision about their prize, whether to keep her as part of their growing fleet or strip her of everything valuable and let her go. The democratic nature of pirate decision-making comes into play once again as the crew debates the pros and cons of maintaining multiple vessels. During the election of a new captain, men who wanted another leader often drew up separate articles and sailed away from their former crewmates. More ships mean more firepower and the ability to capture larger prizes, but they also require more men to sail and fight them. The logistics of coordinating multiple vessels present challenges that test even experienced captains. Thomas observes the careful inventory of the merchant vessel's contents, a process that reveals the complexity of colonial trade. Bolts of fine cloth from English mills sit beside barrels of nails and iron goods destined for frontier settlements. Cases of wine and spirits share space with medical supplies and books, the eclectic mixture reflecting the diverse needs of growing colonial communities. Every item must be evaluated not only for its immediate value, but for its usefulness to the pirate community. The human cargo presents its own challenges and opportunities. Several of the captured sailors possess skills valuable to pirates: a gunner with experience in naval service, a cook who knows how to make palatable meals from ship's provisions, and a navigator familiar with the treacherous waters around the Carolina Capes. Those taken included ship's boys who were serving as apprentices, or as general dogs' bodies, performing cleaning and serving duties. These younger crew members often adapt most readily to pirate life, seeing it as an escape from years of unpaid servitude. The question of releasing the captured vessel becomes academic when a storm system approaches from the southeast. The merchant ship, damaged in the engagement and struggling with jury-rigged repairs, begins taking on water faster than her pumps can handle. Thomas leads the effort to salvage what they can before the vessel becomes a total loss, working through the night to transfer the most valuable cargo and supplies to the Queen Anne's Revenge. The storm, when it arrives, tests every aspect of the ship's construction and the crew's seamanship. Thomas finds himself working frantically to secure loose gear and ensure the ship's structural integrity as massive waves crash over the deck. Sailing ships before the 20th century had no refrigeration at all, and those in charge of provisioning ships selected food that could last a long time. The violent motion threatens to break loose the carefully stowed provisions, turning vital supplies into dangerous projectiles that could kill men or damage the ship. The storm's passage leaves the Queen Anne's Revenge battered but intact, a testament to her solid construction and the skill of her crew. The merchant vessel, however, has foundered during the night, taking with her any cargo that couldn't be transferred in time. Thomas surveys the damage to their own ship, split sails, sprung rigging, and several opened seams that will require careful attention. Yet they have survived, and the sea has once again demonstrated why successful pirates must be master mariners above all else. In the aftermath of the storm, Thomas reflects on the precarious nature of life aboard a pirate vessel. A hard life at sea was a young man's game, and so few pirates were aged over 40. The physical demands of sailing and fighting in an age without modern medicine mean that careers in piracy tend to be brief, measured in months or at most a few years. Those who survive long enough often retire to spend their accumulated wealth in the pirate havens of the Caribbean or the tolerant communities of the Carolina coast. The repair work following the storm provides Thomas with deep satisfaction, the kind that comes from applying skilled craftsmanship to solve complex problems. Working with the ship's carpenter and several of the new recruits from the captured merchant vessel, he methodically addresses each area of damage. New planks are fitted where the old ones have split, rigging is spliced and retensioned, and sails are patched with canvas salvaged from their prize. The international nature of the crew becomes apparent during the repair work, as men from different maritime traditions share their knowledge and techniques. A Dutch sailor demonstrates a particular method of splicing that creates a stronger joint, while one of the Africans who gained freedom when La Concorde was captured shows how his people repair boats damaged by tropical storms. This exchange of knowledge represents one of the unexpected benefits of the pirate life. the opportunity to learn from masters of seamanship from across the Atlantic world. The Queen Anne's Revenge continues her cruise along the Carolina coast, and Thomas settles into the rhythm of life aboard what has become one of the most feared vessels in these waters. Blackbeard used the Queen Anne's Revenge, along with several other ships in his possession, to line up across the Bay of Charleston. He held the city hostage for several weeks. The ship serves not just as a means of pursuing prizes, but as a base for the complex web of relationships that sustain piracy in these waters. The economic ecosystem that supports their way of life extends far beyond the simple capture of merchant vessels. Thomas has learned that successful piracy requires a network of suppliers, buyers, and protectors scattered throughout the Caribbean and along the American coast. Colonial officials, merchants seeking bargain prices on imported goods, and ordinary citizens willing to trade with pirates for necessities all play roles in maintaining this shadow economy. As the weeks pass, Thomas observes the subtle changes that long association brings to the ship's company. Men who began as strangers or even enemies gradually develop the bonds of mutual dependence that characterize successful crews. Pirates strictly followed their articles, and it appears that pirates were more orderly, peaceful, and well-organized among themselves than many of the colonies, merchant ships, or vessels of the Royal Navy. The democratic principles embedded in their articles create a sense of shared ownership in their collective fate. The ship's articles govern not just the distribution of plunder, but the daily conduct that makes life bearable in the confined space of a sailing vessel. Disputes are settled by the collective wisdom of the crew rather than the arbitrary authority of officers. Punishment, when necessary, is carried out according to established procedures rather than personal whim. Thomas has come to appreciate this system, imperfect though it may be, as a marked improvement over the autocratic brutality he experienced aboard legitimate merchant vessels. The changing seasons bring new challenges and opportunities as the Queen Anne's Revenge continues her predatory cruise. Thomas has become an integral part of the ship's company, his skills as a carpenter making him valuable beyond his original expectations. The constant need for repairs and modifications keeps him busy, but he has found satisfaction in work that directly contributes to their collective survival and success. The ship herself has evolved under pirate ownership, her French origins overlaid with modifications that reflect her new purpose and the diverse backgrounds of her crew. The French gave their new and much smaller vessel the appropriate name Mauvaise Rencontre, bad encounter, when they were left with one of Blackbeard's smaller vessels after their ship was taken. The Queen Anne's Revenge, by contrast, has been transformed into something far more formidable than her original builders ever intended. Thomas has learned to read the ship's moods and needs with the intimacy that comes from shared danger and mutual dependence. He knows which timbers groan under strain, where the hull is most vulnerable to storm damage, and how to coax maximum performance from rigging that has been repaired and re-repaired countless times. This knowledge makes him valuable not just as a craftsman, but as someone who understands the vessel's capabilities and limitations. The crew has evolved as well, with new recruits gradually integrating into the ship's complex social structure. Young officers and new crew members, usually powder monkeys, had very little say in the everyday matters of the voyage and were usually ignored by the senior members. Yet the democratic principles that govern major decisions ensure that even the youngest crew members have a voice in their collective fate, a stark contrast to the rigid hierarchies of legitimate maritime service. As another day dawns over the endless expanse of the Atlantic, Thomas prepares for whatever challenges the sea might bring. The Queen Anne's Revenge continues her journey through history, carrying her crew of outcasts and adventurers toward a destiny that none of them can foresee. In June 1718, Blackbeard's fleet attempted to enter Old Topsail Inlet in North Carolina, and the Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground on a submerged sandbar, eventually sinking below water. For now, though, the ship sails on, her black flag snapping in the trade winds, her crew united by articles sworn on Bibles and the shared understanding that their survival depends on their collective skill and courage. Thomas has found in this democratic chaos something approaching freedom, the kind that can only exist in the spaces between empires, where men make their own laws and live by their own codes. The story of life aboard Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge represents more than simple piracy. It reveals a complex alternative society that challenged the established order of the Atlantic world. In their floating commonwealth, men from different nations, races, and backgrounds found common cause in the pursuit of liberty and profit. The ship herself, transformed from slave vessel to pirate flagship, embodies the contradictions and possibilities of an age when the boundaries between civilization and chaos remained fluid and contested. Thomas Whitfield's journey aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge illuminates the daily reality behind the legend, showing us how ordinary men lived extraordinary lives in the brief, violent flowering of the golden age of piracy. Their world was harsh and dangerous, governed by necessity and tempered by the democracy of shared risk. In choosing the uncertain freedom of piracy over the grinding oppression of legitimate maritime service, they created something unique in the annals of seafaring, a society where worth was measured by skill and courage rather than birth and station. The Queen Anne's Revenge sails on through history, carrying within her timbers the stories of all who served aboard her, from the enslaved Africans who knew her as La Concorde to the pirates who transformed her into an instrument of both terror and liberation. In her rise and eventual fall, we see reflected the larger story of an age when the ocean belonged to those bold enough to claim it, and when a ship could represent not just a means of transportation, but a world unto itself, complete with its own laws, customs, and dreams of freedom.